So we'll open it up for any questions,
I
people?
have a question. We obviously have some problems with runaway judges who seem to think that God has given them the right to rule, and that the law as written by our founding fathers is obsolete, and there are several ways that people are looking. Nullification certainly one of them. The Congress of States is another one. It has some advantages, it has some scary aspects. What do you all think of the Congress of States calling another convention for the amendments to the Constitution?
I think it's really a dangerous idea, because I think, one, there's a real problem with the idea of states' rights. If you read the Federalist Papers in the beginning, Hamilton was really clear about why the necessity of a federal government. And also, the irony is, one of his points is that you can have a much smaller government if it's for a much larger area, if it's representative, because you don't have to duplicate the services. So the irony is that the people who want so-called states' rights would have to have 50 times more government if you're going to cover. In other words, that will not solve the illegitimate abuses that we have right now in our federal government. The other reason I think it's really dangerous is we're in a dark age. I mean, who is qualified? Who do we have who thinks on the level of Ben Franklin and Alexander Hamilton and our founding fathers right now? But having said that, you're totally right, and LaRouche brought this up as we were discussing all these new assaults. We have a very severe problem in our courts. Yeah. It's hideous. I mean, it really is. What people consider justice is insane. It has nothing to do with truth, nothing to do with justice. It's completely arbitrary, and does have to be totally overhauled.
What's the least worst approach we could do? We understand that anything we do has got a downside. It's the nature of reality. But what is the best approach you think that we have to the problems of Congress being an oligarchy, not a set of servants, the judges the same way? What do you think is the best way to go about, or the least worst, go about working on this?
Well, think about the American Revolution, because what really occurred at the point when the nation was won is because when the actual American Revolution was going on, there was not all that many people that supported it.
Yeah.
It was a very few, the people that really, in a lot of cases, gave that last full measure of devotion, kind of thing that you think about, like Washington crossing the Delaware, But what happened is that you had this shift in cultural identity among the population at large, a much broader, assimilation of that. And really, that's what you need now. You have to. That's why the whole question of not just impeachment, but the fact that will kind of unleash for people what's been pounded down, really, and particularly since the Kennedy assassination and the getting away with that, which was really in a certain way more horrific, because what it did was it kind of suppressed among people what Kennedy was trying to bring out among people, which is this idea of who really we are as a nation.
Kennedy assassinations, plural.
Yes, absolutely. And more. Martin Luther King as well, Malcolm X. These are all done to cut off the real leadership in the country that was trying to get the nation back on track, right? Kennedy was clear. He was not going for the Vietnam War. He'd been advised by people like Eleanor Roosevelt and MacArthur, this is a trap. Don't get involved. Go with Roosevelt's policy of post-World War finding areas of cooperative development among these nations. Let's get rid of the idea of empire. Let's produce across the world that cultural identity of the real United States, of that real historical United States. And that's what you've got to do now.
You gotta
Because,
get it back first.
well, that's the question of it's kind of the reversal of what happened with the Kennedy assassination. Starting to go to, the impeachment question will start to unleash among people what has been suppressed among people. The idea that they do have a say in what goes on. That we're not going to have these people pushed into the leadership positions who clearly don't represent the nation, and the second they're in, you see a worse shift in the nation. And that's been a continuous, except for certain kind of breaks from that, that's what you've had since the Kennedy's assassination, right?
So
that
you
you've
think
had
we
worse
need to clone
and
you
worse.
two and send at least 80 of you into the Senate.
But
400 into the House.
once you start to recreate that cultural identity, then you're not going to have anything like this David Barron who gets put forward to become a justice. Here's a guy that was the author of the torture and renditions legalization, right? And this guy is going to be potentially one step away from the Supreme Court. I mean, that's what we'll do, but that's what will stop that, right?
Well, specifically,
Right.
what are the most significant articles of impeachment that you would put at the top of the list?
Well, there's actually a number of them. I mean, I actually
Just
sat
what's the
down.
top four?
I sat down actually when Diane and I went to the state Democratic convention, and I actually happened to sit with a couple of lawyers and brought up the issue of impeachment. And at the point when I went through the issue of the drone killings of American citizens, and they would agree that this is an impeachable offense. I brought up the fact that we almost went to war in Syria, without the consent of Congress. I mean, he made the decision. I'm going to war. I've decided we're going to war. This idea of a unitary executive is what LaRouche had warned about with the case of Obama. He has this Nero-type classical identity and will move, given no constraints, he will move in that direction, exactly similar to what happened in Nero, right? And you're good.
Well, there's a really good interview on our website with Francis Boyle, who's a professor of constitutional law, who said that that impeachment proceedings can be launched from the floor. They don't have to go through committee. I think Kucinich tried to do that with Cheney and Bush, and Nancy Pelosi took it off the table. But he said that the things that you could do from the floor, which would hardly require hearings, are what Bruce said: the killing of U.S. citizens with drones, because the case is so clear. And he says there are 6 people. I only know who 2 of them are, and I've heard that there are 4. But at any rate, in Yemen, everyone knows Anwar al-Awlaki and his 16-year-old son were killed with drones without due process or charges or anything. The second is the bombing of Libya, which we did for 250 days, and it was declared a humanitarian mission under international law. Obama never went to the Congress for that. So these are 2 things right there. And then he also brought up the intent to attack Syria, the expressed intent to launch a war of aggression without consent of the Congress, that these are clear impeachable offenses.
His decision that the Congress was not in session, and also from that standpoint, allowing him to make
Appointments.
the decision to put people onto the NLRB board, right, was another one,
Well, then you also
which
have
was
this-
actually, cleared up by the district court itself in Washington, saying you can't do that. You can't arbitrarily decide on your say-so that Congress is out of session. You know.
He also, frankly, should be yanked for what he said in his State of the Union address. I mean, that was pretty outrageous, that I can't work with the Congress, I don't have to go through them, and I will legislate with a pen and a telephone. I mean, that may not be impeachment, that could be Section 4 of the 25th Amendment, which is a president who is unfit to serve. But that would require someone in his inner cabinet having the courage to go up against him, so that's probably less likely.
How about his refusal to enforce the law? Because as the executive branch, that is his job. If he decides not to enforce a law which is legally passed by Congress, is that not also an impeachable offense?
It seems like it would be, yeah. I mean, it's interesting, Elizabeth Warren has pledged, she wants to bring Glass-Steagall to a vote in the Senate before the elections. Yeah, and Angus King, the independent, it's a wild group. But she brought up Eric Holder's refusal to prosecute the banks. The too big to fail, apparently are also too big to jail. I mean, that is criminal. You have banks like HSBC, which was found guilty of laundering $20 billion of drug money, and no person was charged with a crime, and the bank got off with a fine of $1 billion. But actually, the really criminal thing, and we have a friend, he's not here today, Rick Sarkeesian, who used to do financial advising to HSBC and other places, and what he's looking at are the interest rate swaps. I want to talk about crime. I mean, this is because you had the LIBOR scandal where they were rigging right, you have 16 banks, and anyone who believed the system would work, I mean, I guess they still believe in the tooth fairy. The 16 biggest banks are going to all be honest, and they're going to report what their interbank lending rate is, and then you call that the interest rate of the day, right? So you have things like the city of Detroit, which has a lot of debt. So the banks come in, and I forget it was Bank of America, UBS, and I forget who else was involved. So they come to the city council, and I mean, the mayor maybe should be jailed for stupidity, but not. Anyway, they come to them and they say, look, your city has so much debt, and we see that you have this fixed, you have a variable interest rate. And we are really concerned that that interest rate is going to go up and the city is going to be screwed. Now, we kind and generous and honest Wall Street bankers, we are willing to take the risk because we so love the people of Detroit that we will take the risk of the variable interest rate. And we will swap you a rate at 4% or whatever. So you have this nominally low rate. And then, of course, what happens is the banks lower the interest rate because the whole thing is rigged, and the city has to pay the difference.
The penalty.
Yeah.
And the city ends up therefore owing $243 million or something like that. And then these bankers have the audacity to claim that they're taking a haircut because they're going to make the pensioners of the city, where the average pension is only $1,800 a year, and they're going to lose 90%. But they're going to only insist on collecting 75% of the $243 million, which was fraudulent theft to begin with. I mean, and in New Jersey, this is massive. New Jersey Transit, I think it's something like $52 or $56 million a year, just interest rate swaps. Wow. Probably every city, we should look at what's actually going on with the New Jersey pension funds, what's going on with these things with the gambling casinos. Who wants their pension tied to Revel? But that's the teachers' pensions in New Jersey are tied to the Revel casino. I mean, it's such crime, and it's such orders of magnitude beyond. They like to get everyone all worked up about, the unions demanding too high of a salary when you have billions and billions of dollars being ripped off, and it's not even mentioned and it's not even being brought up. It's, unbelievable. The other thing in the state I found out about from another friend of ours, Marilyn English, you remember? Mm-hmm. Yeah, who is looking into the illegal mortgages and foreclosures. And when banks transfer a mortgage from one bank to the other, there's supposed to be a fee that's paid to the state. And in the state of New Jersey, under Christie, the state has not bothered to collect once. any of these fees, which is a few $1 billion. You could close the budget deficit just by collecting the, I forget what the name of it is, but the fee from transferring the mortgage from one bank to another. But I wouldn't say they're protecting Wall Street.
No, they're protecting themselves. Personal greed.
Right.
No one cares about what happens to Wall Street unless it affects their own. So it's.
Right.
But as Diane was saying, that it's clear from these indications going on that there is a push to get Obama impeached, and it's coming from these circles around the presidency, people who realize that, you know, the economy's still in free fall. We're potentially any day liable to see the entire thing blow apart, Dodd-Frank go into effect, and a Cyprus-style bailout, you know, or bail-in, where they just seize people's assets out of the banks.
Who is on the president's side? Obviously, we're going to have a power struggle. Who do
Yeah,
you think-
well, you're
who
seeing
do you think
that-
will be backing Obama?
Well,
Satan.
We know that.
well, he's the banks for obviously for
Yeah, Wall
sure.
Street.
But you know, you've got layers within the Democratic Party that are they're looking at a disaster. You know, not just in terms of the potential elections coming up, you know, this year, 2016, but they're looking at a potential disaster for the nation. You know, so you've got, you know, Dianne Feinstein that coming out when the White House authorizes the CIA to break into the Select Intelligence Committee computers, right? Going after, I mean, getting on the floor of the Senate, not writing a letter, getting on the floor of the Senate, publicly saying, you know, we're not going to put up with this.
And Dianne Feinstein was an Obama lover
So clearly you've got
before.
certain layers that are moving in certain ways. You're getting certain indications that this is going on, you know?
Feinstein doesn't love anybody but herself. I mean, she's violently anti-gun and carries a .357 Magnum in her purse and has for 30 years.
So, I mean, you're seeing all that stuff around the Snowden, this stuff around Snowden. This is pushing, you know, layers within the intelligence community, the military, you know, et cetera. I mean, lying.
Can we hibernate till
the-
this is
you know,
over?
no, no, the sun is actually starting to come out.
Besides the interview that Diane was talking about, there's also 2 reports on the website. One talks directly about the impeachable offenses and actually goes into what impeachment is, because many people are confused that, you know, that poor Obama will just be thrown out on the street and, you know, we'll have riots everywhere, and impeachment is actually bringing charges against the president or whoever is part of that impeachment process, saying that you have to answer for this, you have to answer for that. Those are the kinds of things that impeachment really means. It would be like a total transparency of the things that he should be accused of. And then there's another report that talks about how the United States has deteriorated since the Obama administration was elected in the first place.
No, yeah,
So
got all
those
kinds of.
2 things
I mean,
are
you've
also
had Senate hearings with Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders from Vermont, called "Dying Young in America," you know, which goes through this whole collapse of the, you know, the. I mean, they use the example of the county by county
Yeah.
correlation of the lowering of the, you know, the
Life expectancy.
life expectancy, you know, across the country. You know, but you're very likely to see something along the lines of what happened with Nixon. It wasn't an impeachment. It was, you know, people within the top layers of the Republican Party being pushed by different layers, not just even them, but, you know, Democratic layers, military layers, etc., saying you have to go. You know, you're too much of a burden for the nation. And that's really what you're likely to see.
One problem that I have with putting a lot of resources into an impeachment process at this point. First of all, he doesn't have that much longer to his administration. And, you know, I understand that the speed at which things can happen, you know, that is all a question of relativity. But my position is that the effort in a positive direction, including getting your message across. I mean, I think the things that you're saying resonate with a growing number of people in the country who recognize that things are going to hell in a handbasket, quick. And so a lot of people who have been very sanguine about politics are perking up and looking for answers. One of the problems I see in, like, your candidacy is that you've got so much educating to do. You've got so much basic, fundamental information that people don't have.
Right.
So you're speaking another language. I know the way Diane spoke, that a lot of the way a lot of her expressions resonate with people who know what she's talking about.
Yeah.
But she's talking over the heads of so many people because they haven't the faintest idea of the major forces at work on a planetary scale, and don't have the historical background to create the context in which you have very relevant, powerful meaning.
Well,
Yeah, we should have had 10,000 at this meeting today.
But the thing is, I mean, the idea is proven every day in talking to people on the street, that these ideas do resonate with people. I mean, Art and I could tell you about, you know, we were at a Wawa here in Toms River, and we had a gentleman came up and, you know, was, you know, we had the impeach Obama thing we were talking about, Glass-Steagall, and he was like, you know, I really understand what you guys are saying. He said, you know, I lived under a bridge. I lost my job and I lost my home in Jersey City. I lived under a bridge for 5 years. He said, I ate out of a garbage can. You know, I'm just kind of getting going again. And he said, here's $5. This is half of my food for tomorrow, but I want you to have it.
Also, one thing,
What
can I just say one thing before on that question? Because I think it's really important to think about Shelley. And I don't know if you've read In Defense of Poetry.
oh, yes.
Okay, because, and then you can take other people like Rosa Luxemburg, but a mass strike. What happens? And this is why I think this Berlin Wall coming down question is really important. When people because no one really gives their life for themselves, or no one really sacrifices their reputation for personal gain. But it has to be something that you feel is really worth it. Like those people in Germany when they thought that perhaps the Tiananmen Square was going to happen to them, that they could all get mowed down by tanks. But they came out because they said it's unacceptable that people would have to live like this. And I really think in future generations, because it's not just for yourself, because for yourself you say, well, I'm prepared to suffer. I can tighten my belt, I can suffer, but the idea of this happening from generation to the next, to my children, is not acceptable. And what happened in Germany was that even though you had a really ugly rock, drug, sex culture, even in the East, during this revolutionary period, everyone wanted to go to plays by Friedrich Schiller. And when the wall came down, even though Pink Floyd went over there and made a heroic effort with the wall and all this awful rock music, the theme of the day was Beethoven's Ninth Symphony. And you could say, well, did the people really understand it? Did these 18 and 19-year-olds understand anything about Beethoven? Did they know what counterpoint is? Did they? No. But there's a quality, and Shelley really describes it the best, and I wish I could say it in the poetic language, but he talks about a trumpet carrying a sound that the trumpet itself doesn't even understand, doesn't know. And in moments of revolution like that people find themselves instruments of profound ideas that they themselves may not even understand. And I think that we're really on the cusp of something like that. And in one sense, I think what you're saying is very important, because the thing that will allow people to move is they have to know that there's hope. They have to know that there's a solution. If they don't know there's a solution, then they will be inclined to totally despair and do nothing.
Trust and hope. They
Yeah.
trust you. Not just your knowledge, but they trust your intentions, and your interest is more cosmic than personal. And that they and I feel this personally. I would start marching with you if I didn't feel that there are things more immediate, more direct, that can, for example, Elizabeth Warren and her support of Glass-Steagall. I mean, so she's and her performance or public statements have a power of immediacy. And where I think that you're losing some people is the obligation to go back historically and give account to for the position we're in today. Somehow, if that could be streamlined or expressed in maybe more contemporary elements, that it would reach people more quickly. But I mean, I know, as I said, when I first became reconnected with LaRouche thinking, after years ago when I lived in Virginia, 35 years ago, was when I saw that poster on Long Beach Island with Obama and the Hitler mustache, and doing my U-turn in the boulevard, and with the intent of straightening these people out. And I listened, and I said, well, then I was confused, because the people I know who want Obama's hide are not people I want anything to do with. They are of a different stripe. And it took a while for me to understand you're coming from a different angle. I mean, and from a foundation of truth and legitimacy. I just throw that out for whatever. I've repeated it a number of times to Margaret and some of the other voices I've talked to on the phone. But I don't seem to, that doesn't seem to be a very welcome point of view.
Because I think it would be good for you to come out and organize and talk to people and see how they're thinking. The American people have been done a really great disservice, as George Washington warned, with this party system. Because it makes you insane, really, because you see that something is wrong, And then you say, well, if I think that, then I have to fit into this theorem lattice, because that's what's presented by the party structure or the news media. And if I think this way, then I have to fit into this box. And then you have the very funny thing, which I found over and over when you're speaking to groups of people, like Bruce and I have been at a lot of Tea Party meetings, and also we were at the Democratic Convention. I did find 3 Democratic Party hacks who can't stand Obama and think he should be impeached, but it was a lot of it was a lot of searching. 2 were from the Philippines and 1 was a Jewish woman from Russia, and they definitely knew that he was had to go. But what you find is when you present people with ideas that are so-called outside the box, is that all of a sudden they also break out of what they've been put into. And that's what we're seeing in Keisha's campaign in Texas. I mean, this is phenomenal. We're finding that a lot of these people who are now Republicans were Democrats when Kennedy was president. And they couldn't stand what happened to the Democratic Party and became Republicans. But when you have a Democrat who says, no, we're going to revive that, we don't believe, why should we allow environmentalists to prevent us from irrigating the desert, right? Why, suddenly it takes on a whole different, and I just want to say one story that my husband told me who's down there, which is really, again, like this. He was, at the table, and this man comes up who seems really sort of down and out, and says, well, I think Obama's Hitler. And Chris said, well, he is like Hitler. And they have this whole conversation, and then the guy is really interested in the economic policies, the irrigation, the nuclear power, and so on. And it turns out, I forget all the details, but it's clear that when he said he thought Obama was like Hitler, he actually knew who Hitler was. It was not a flippant comment. So they talk some more, and the guy's last name is Marshall, and it turns out he's the grandnephew of George Marshall of the Marshall Plan. And here he is, and you have no idea who you're talking to, and you meet this person who seems like some country bumpkin, and they actually have totally profound knowledge, and they probably, a lot of times when people meet us out in the street, they say, I haven't been able to talk to anyone about these things in 20 years or 30 years or. So, and luckily we don't need the majority. That's the other thing. The majority will get swept up. We need a minority. We need a minority who will be courageous. And you have the courage to say all those unpopular things. Like talk about the Queen of England. Every time I want to talk about the Queen of England, I get a knot in my stomach because NBC, they did such a number on LaRouche says the Queen of England, blah, 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 blah. But then you look at her, she's the head of 53 nations, for God's sakes. I mean, right. Yeah, that's what I meant to bring that up. Prince Charles in Canada, this was the best thing he could have done, because the Russians are a little confused. They tend to blame the United States entirely for the policies as opposed to the British. So the fact that Prince Charles went to Canada and said that Putin was like Hitler was perfect, because now the Russians have let loose on the British royal family, and they just did this incredible little video. Did you see it?
No,
it's a 1.5 minute on Russian TV, RT, where they go through, they say, and Charles made this comment that Putin was like Hitler, and the British deputy prime minister defended it. And of course, royals are not supposed to talk about politics in public because they're supposedly not involved, even though the Queen has veto power over every single parliament. Anyway, so then what they do on RT is they show all these family portraits of the royal family and their Nazi spouses, all the way down to Prince Harry dressed up in a Nazi uniform with a swastika for Halloween.
Wow.
So it was really
it was
good.
a masquerade party he was at or something.
Yeah.
That's who he decided to come
Dressed up in an SS uniform.
Right.
Better than Spider-Man.
Yeah. So.
How have your presentations, how well attended
Oh, it totally varies.
And what exactly is your standing now with regard to the Democratic Party?
In what sense? I mean,
Well, I mean, are you registered with the party as candidates
Yes.
and recognized and so
yes,
forth?
Yeah.
yes, we are.
Right.
Yeah.
It hasn't gotten as bad as Texas, where Keisha went to go to a Democratic Party meeting and they wouldn't let her in unless she took an oath of allegiance to Obama.
She had to sign a loyalty oath to Obama. But then she looked behind them and there were only 5 people there, so she decided it Because not many people wanted to take that oath.
She said, I think she said something like, I think everybody probably is voting for me already.